All right. Our team has done tens of hours into actually researching this specific topic, and it's the topic of the history of the monetary system. And the reason that we studied this long was because we wanted to put it in a short and concise manner, because realistically, you can't find anything on this topic or the economic political state of the world online for anything less than 35 minutes. So realistically, it's in short and sweet if you want to understand the United States system. And it pretty much started originally in like the 1820s, and in 1812 there was something called the Overture, which was a festival for the Russia to actually celebrate their win of the war at the time. And so as they were doing this, the entire monetary system was changing and shift of powers was happening. And what ended up going on around this time was the United Nations was actually formed, and they formed this United Nation based off of the fact that they are not a part of international law, so they act pretty much as land pirates. They're able to do just about anything that they want to because they're just pirates of the land. And so the UN is not legal, although that's pretty much where this originated from. Is the Rothschilds ended up bankrupting the Bank of England. And the way that they did that was Mayor Rothschild ended up buying all of the stocks and shares from Napoleon and Wellington. And since he went out of his way and bought all of these shares, he was able to bankrupt the entire Bank of England, get rights to the Bank of England, and during this time, him getting the rights to the Bank of England, he also had the breeding rights to the British royal family. And this is not the first time that they actually lost reign within their royal blood, because this happened in the 1300s with Elizabeth II. In other words, Elizabeth Mountbatten. And that's a whole nother story. I'm not even going to get into that because that history doesn't even matter for this. But realistically, that's how they got reign into power, and they did so through fiat currency. Because fiat currency always starts well but ends awfully. And the reason that it always starts well is because usually it's based on the fact that there's actual backing and intrinsic value upon what is being created for the form of currency. So when they first originally created currency, it was all the way back in Lydia. And currency and money are two different things. Money actually will hold intrinsic value. Currency does not always hold intrinsic value. It may have intrinsic value in the beginning, but it doesn't always. And so what they did was they pretty much just made gold coins all the same weight, because even in ancient times before that, if they wanted to trade and barter, you could see it in the inscriptions that they had these like weight scales. That was because they were pretty much doing it by eye, and it was just a guess until this actual money system was actually created. And then it later goes into Athens, which Athens is one of the largest nations that was created and that reigned for quite a while based off of the fact of fiat currency. And the reason that they actually started losing value was because the coins started getting debased and diluted over time. Diluted by is what I mean by diluted is the coins at the end of the day were 100% gold, and then later on were made to be, say, 85% gold. And this also is similar to the Byzantine Empire when they created their coin. And their coin was called the solidus, which was 100% gold, which later on just ended up being 85% after about 600 years. So they preserved this right, and this is why the Byzantine Empire was able to last for so long, was because they were able to keep the value of their actual currency. So every single time somebody were to barter or trade, they were actually exchanging value. But if you're exchanging just IOU bucks, then it will never actually compound in your favor. It can only compound negatively. And this is the problem that fiat currency has, is because since history, we have never had a fiat currency that's ever succeeded or always stayed on the backing of gold. So every time they switch over to the backing of gold, it's pretty much the transfer of a new fiat currency, because people love bubbles. They've funneled themselves to bubbles, and everything's great because everything's perfect. They get handed what they want and ask for from the government, so they just go ahead and go into a new bubble. And this is also where the money is being funneled into. So you understand the stages of money, then you can understand what stage we are actually in, which once they actually start funding for wars and massive expenditures, then it gets to the point where they're paying for this huge industry of people. And eventually they're going to run out because the people will lose value in the actual economic and monetary system. And if the people lose the value, then there's nothing backing it. Eventually, if no one, especially the people working for the nation, don't deem it as valuable, this causes an uprise and overthrow against the actual parties and the economic monetary system, which causes an actual change. So the more people that actually get educated on this specific thing, the more that we're able to actually go ahead and change the entire fate of humanity. Gold and silver, since we're not abundant, it's scarce, and it's very valuable since the beginning of time. And the reason that they wanted to strip the gold standard from gold was because of greed, so that they can actually trade it on the stock market. And that was the Smithsonian Agreement. So the Smithsonian Agreement happened in 1971, allowing the entire reserve of gold be put as a commodity so people could buy the likes of this commodity, which before we were able to actually trade in $1 for $1 worth of gold. And that's how it originally started back in the 1870, which is the Gold Federal Reserve. And so the gold reserve standard being attached to the dollar allowed for economic growth and big booms to happen and get people out of the actual Great Depression. So once this happened, about 1914, the year after the Federal Reserve was created, which was so happenly the year after the Titanic happened, which 3 of the largest businessmen in the entire world right now today would be worth billions of dollars, were killed on the Titanic so happenly. Not saying that it was planned or anything, but at the end of the day, that happened. The Federal Reserve was then created, and so the Federal Reserve was pretty much just a mimic of what Great Britain actually offered. So in Great Britain, they launched fiat currency that was backed by gold. And since they did this, the United States bought all of this up. The United States bought all this money. You started using it and said, hey, I want my gold. So they ended up losing about 50% of their gold reserve. That came to the United States. Since that came back to the United States, we were then able to launch a federal currency back in the 1800s, the 1800s, 1870, because we had so much gold, so we had enough to deploy for our economic system to start doing much better. That was pretty much it. So that's why they were like, okay, bet we're gonna back every single dollar with these with this gold, and then we're gonna export this every single place in the world in order for people to actually use this every single day. Since they did that, every nation pretty much just went along with it. It was like, oh yeah, it's backed by gold. Then they later just changed it out of nowhere. And it was like, listen, we can't actually give you the full gold reserve right now. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen. Boom. The gold standard ends up getting restored in 1925. Then World War II happens. Once you start funneling to war, you're pretty much getting away from being a successful economy because you're stressing only on war. Now you have a whole industry to make sure to pay, as well as they have to back something that's never survived ever in human history, fiat currency. So it's just an inevitable hole that economies end up going down. So once this happened, they ended up switching it to the Bretton Woods. And the reason that they switched it to the Bretton Woods is because they restored the gold standard, but not fully. They restored the gold standard and gave 50% for every single dollar. So you would get half a dollar of gold for every single dollar. But individuals are not able to cash in on this, but banks and different systems are able to. So people around the world were like, yo, the United States, I want my gold for these dollars. It's pretty much all they did. And then from the time of 1959 to 1971, the United States lost 50% of its entire gold reserve. But it already had a gold reserve prior to the fact that they got Britain's gold reserve. So since this entire thing happened, they then later they didn't know what to do after 1971 creating the Smithsonian Agreement. They went ahead and put it as a stock traded commodity. The United States dollar was then able to be traded against other fiat currencies around the world because it was now the world reserve currency. So they pretty much just created a foreign exchange market in order for more money to be traded and bartered every single day. That's why trillions and trillions of dollars are traded in this market every single day. Simple. It's not rocket science. It is, in my opinion, crazy that the Federal Reserve actually is traded as a stock commodity, which for federal regulations, according to banking laws, no federal agency is allowed to actually run publicly inside of a stock exchange in any part of the world. It's an international law. So that doesn't make any sense. But what doesn't make even more sense is the fact that how the money is created. So if I come to you and I say, hey, I have this dollar and I want to claim my gold back, that is a claim check. So now, if there's nothing to claim, what are we claiming? So at the end of the day, what happens is when you write a check, it is basically an IOU. And when you put money inside of the bank, that same money, then it has the ability to be loaned outward to other people. Since it has the ability to be loaned to other people, then you are just creating more money by going to the bank and putting it in the bank account. And it's really just as simple as that. 92 to 96% of all transactions are funneled through the bank. So they're able to pretty much print more money by every single person that puts money into the bank. That's why people are like, oh, no, you shouldn't have a bank account. You should be investing every single thing that you have. It's because they're using this to print more money. And the Treasury pretty much issues these IOUs, bonds, okay? The bank then buys these IOUs with currency. The claim check that used to have value but doesn't have any value anymore. The Federal Reserve then writes IOU checks and hands them to the bank in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. Then currency is created. That's simply just how it works. The Federal Reserve and Treasury are swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and then this process enriches the banks and indebts the public. That's all that happens. Because they can't actually loan any of their money. It's not their money. It's an account attached to your name that if you sign, then it gives them the right to actually go ahead and loan this money out. It's the fact that you went and gave them your social security number, and that social security number opened up an account for them to access, which creates these bonds. And then they sell the bond to the Treasury using using the bank as the middleman, goes to the bank. The bank then says, hey, I want to transfer these 4 checks. And then the checks are claims, and so more money is just printed. If it's a complicated process, but if I could put it in simple terms, but pretty much every single time you go to the bank and you put $1 in, they're able to create 10 folds of that $1. Them creating 10 folds of this one specific dollar allows for them to go ahead and loan the money outwards, in which they only have to keep 10% of your actual money that you put in the bank, that dollar, in reserve. The rest of it is just pretty much a bank credit. So there's no $1 actually attached to it. It's just a bank credit. And then they're loaning this money outwards to other people. Where's the money coming from? If it's still in my bank account, then that's just numbers on a screen. So you got to start understanding how fractional reserve banking actually works. And if you understand how fractional reserve banking works, you can understand where the money is funneled. It's pretty much that simple, realistically. It's just a commercial contract. Every single thing that you do in this world is a commercial contract. You get a receipt. That is pretty much a receipt for something that you just purchased. That is a contractual agreement. To understand how money is right now, okay? Say if I sell you this t-shirt. This t-shirt, say I'm selling it to you for $1. This is what you value, but the dollar has no value. So let me go ahead and give you this, and then with my dollar, it doesn't actually have the value. The valuable thing is the shirt inside of that. And that's a little bit absurd when we're dealing with money. There should be value attached to money. Yeah, it's just a fascinating thing. So every time you go ahead and commit commerce, you go and buy anything, that money then is deposited to the bank account again by somebody else, and then they're able to print even more money because they're able to loan more money outwards. So it's an ongoing cycle for them to go ahead and print more and more money based on the fact that we're going to use their system. Forced to comply. It's really just a fascinating thing. So we, the people, really are what currency gets its value from. That's literally how it works. And then we're taxed by the IRS, who then turn it over to the Treasury. So the Treasury pays the principal plus interest, then paying the principal plus interest on the bond that the Federal Reserve bought with nothing in it. With an account with nothing in it. They're just literally buying it based off the fact that we are giving our social security numbers in order for them to run through an actual trust. Because if we're the beneficiaries, they're the fiduciaries. So the fiduciary takes care of the beneficiary. This is how trusts work. So therefore, it gives them the act to work on our behalf. That's literally just 1 + 1 if you put it in simple terms. Our taxes literally don't go to anything. Instead, the taxes literally are used by Treasury to pay interest on bonds with nothing in them. That's fraud. Literal fraud. We can get into more in a little bit. I think this camera's about to die. I'm going to switch over to this one because I think this is a valuable talk. And realistically, I kind of want to get this information out to everybody, the masses. So the more that we understand our history, the more that we can change the history that is coming up. So, before the Federal Reserve in 1913, there was no income tax. The Constitution that was amended to include income tax. Literally that year that the Federal Reserve was created, it was amended in the Constitution for no income tax to ever happen. Think of the British Tea Party. When they poured all the tea over, that was over tax. It's because you can tax something that isn't valuable. And this is the loophole that they use from the Constitution, because it says in the Constitution, we're supposed to only deem gold and silver valuable. Anything else is not actually valuable. And that's their loophole. It's a fiat currency. It's not based on gold and silver anymore. So they're able to tax it accordingly. It's not what it's solely based upon. So even if it's not solely based upon it, and it still has some gold that's based on it, it's not fully based on it. So that was their little legal loophole. And it builds the debt ceiling into this political conversation that it has no prevalence being in politics. It's literally based on a paradox, a false belief. There's interest on every dollar in existence. Never is enough currency to pay debt. There's never going to be enough currency. Ever. Just to continue economy's debt must be created. That's it. To create and continue economies, debt must be created. Literally. And gold and silver, you can't print. So that's the reason that it's supposed to be the only actual valuable things. It's unconstitutional what they're actually doing within the economics of this country, of every country in the world. Inflation is a slow and insidious tax that is very stealthy.